صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى روحك وبدنك الطاهرة. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. محمد رسول الله والذين معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانا سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The concept of Adalat Al-Sahaba, or the justice, integrity of the companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam, is seen as one of the most pivotal beliefs that has shaped the Muslim world today. For it is a belief that the overwhelming majority of our Sunni brethren have accepted, while the school of Ahlul Bayt has rejected. As a result, the Shia for centuries have been subject to name-calling and slander and defamation. We have been called Rawafid, we have been called Zanadiqa, Kuffar, and the list goes on, simply because of our refusal to accept such a controversial topic and subject. The idea of Adalat Al-Sahaba being a fundamental in certain schools is, in a nutshell, the concept of every single companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam being subject to reverence by default of being a companion of the Holy Prophet. Now, there is an age-old misconception because of this exact reason right here, the refusal to accept this concept, that the Shia hate the companions of the Holy Prophet. It's high time that is put to rest. The Shia do not hate the companions of the Holy Prophet. We get our narrations from the Quran. The Quran narrates to us the Holy Prophet of Islam, what he was like, from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and from the companions, the upright companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam. However, to accept such a concept is something that is rejected. Why? Because by making every single companion, over 120,000 of them, all udul, or deserving of reverence, they are now considered just, or have integrity enough such that they will never deliberately sin. Hence, they are udul. When you look at the books of literature and you want to realize if a hadith or a tradition is reliable, you have to make sure that the narrator is considered adil, someone that would not deliberately lie, would not make a sin. So you find that in this idea of Adalat Al-Sahaba, the companions will all never deliberately sin. However, they can make mistakes here and there, but never deliberately sin or make a mistake out of malign intention. You find this is actually quite homogeneous to the concept of imamah. Yes, the other side has vehemently rejected imamah. They've made that clear, of course. However, there seems to be not too many differences when examining the two ideas. Imamah, the idea that after the Holy Prophet of Islam came 13, including Lady Zahra salamullahi alayha, infallibles who are all just. And if we find a chain of narration, a chain of narrators leading back to any one of these leaders, these infallible leaders of ours, then that tradition that they have reported is considered true. irrespective of the climate at the time, whether they were under a certain empire, so they spoke out of precaution, taqiyya, let's say, it is clear that if this is confirmed from the Imam, then it is accepted that they reported this, they at least said this. This is a truth that was said from the Imams. Then we study the context. Were they under, let's say, taqiyya, so they may have said something for the preservation of society or one's life. But nonetheless, if it is confirmed that the narrators leading back to the Imam reporting this statement is true, if the chain is true, then yes, the Imam said that. When you accept Adalat Al-Sahaba, however, every single Sahabi, given that the chain is correct and reliable, whatever they reported is true, because they can never narrate something out of evil intention. They are not evil. They will never deliberately make sin. They can have errors. So you notice the underlining differences here. With regards to imamah, the imams are infallible. If the chain is a correct chain of narrations, this man heard from this man, from this lady, from her cousin, from this guy, that heard the imam say, if that chain is reliable, then the imam, whatever they said, we accept that they have said it. If the chain with regards to Adalat Al-Sahaba is reliable, leading back to any of the 120 companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam is reliable, then yes, this is exactly what the companions said, and they will never deliberately make something up, because lying is haram, and they will never deliberately lie. However, the imams can never deliberately sin nor make mistakes. In Adalat Al-Sahaba, this worldview, the companions will never deliberately sin, but they can make mistakes. And this is why you will see many will say, Imam Ali radiyallahu anhu wa karramallahu wajhuhu fought Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. Why? Because Muawiyah and Imam Ali are Sahaba, none of them sinned. Even though blood was spilled and shed all over the floor, there was no sinning happening. It was just a mistake. Why? By default of Muawiyah being a companion, he didn't deliberately want to kill Ali for malign, malicious, vile, evil intention. There was none of that. He simply used his rationale, which is called ijtihad. He used his ijtihad and he said that, yeah, I believe Ali has to die. He has to fight. We have to fight him here to bring about justice. And so you find that both of them, by default of being companions, are not considered sinners in this moment. And alhamdulillah, there is a consensus, mutually accepted from our side and our dear Sunni brethren, that Imam Ali was on the right side here. Aliyun ma'al haqq. He was right in this condition. What does that make Muawiyah? Just he made a mistake. He wasn't sinning. No. Even though he wanted to see Imam Ali's head spilled on the floor, he didn't make a mistake. He didn't sin. It was just a mistake. He used his rationale. He was a mujtahid at the time. Why? Because he was a Sahabi. He saw the Prophet. And because of the concept of Adalat Al-Sahaba, or the integrity of the companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam, then there must be something else. It wasn't a sin. It was clearly an error that happened. How is this substantiated? And what is our response to the points that are brought and provided with regarding this idea here? One reference is found in the Holy Quran. You find that, by the way, there is no mutually accepted hadith, mutually meaning from both sides, Shia and Sunni, nor ayah of the Holy Quran that says anything of this idea, that all the companions are udul and whatever they say is accepted, etc., etc. That is not found. That doesn't exist, okay? However, there are verses which are claimed to be references to this idea. What verses? The first is chapter 48, verse 29 of the Holy Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Muhammadun Rasulullah. والذين معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam is the messenger of God, and those amongst him وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشُدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ are firm against the disbelievers, رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم merciful amongst one another. تَرَاهُمْ رُكَّعًا سُجَّدًا you will find them prostrating, bowing down. يَبْتَغُونَ فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانًا seeking the satisfaction and pleasure of their Lord and His sanctuary. تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانه سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود, that the marks and signs of worship is on their face. Whenever you look at someone who is very pious and humble, you see what many will describe like a nur, a light. Haven't you seen someone? When you look at that person, you say, MashaAllah, they have a light to them. Not a physical light, but they have some light emerging and emitting from their face. Allah describes this phenomenon here, a spiritual light. تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانه سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود, that the marks and signs of worship and prayer is on their face from the amount of sujood and prostration they do. Indeed, this is a huge statement of praise to the companions of the Prophet. Why? Because there are companions of the Prophet who were with the Prophet of Islam that we reject as ones who are deserving of reverence and respect. But they were with the Prophet, so they fit into that category. How do we respond then? We respond by saying, well, first of all, yes, we acknowledge, we were very clear about it, and it's not a secret, that there are companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam whom we say are not deserving of the respect and are not subject to the reverence that they deserve and are made to seem like they deserve. Particularly the first three khulafa, and this is not something that is a secret. We do not recognize the legitimacy of the caliphate of the first three caliphs. We believe it belongs to the man who was made clear, the successor of Rasulullah on the day of Ghadir. But these individuals who we are stating are not subject to respect. They are in that category. مَعَهُ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاهُ. Were they not with the Prophet? So how do you respond then? The response comes with this. The continuation of that verse. There is no general idea in the Holy Quran, brothers and sisters, and you will find this a pattern, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified it. No general concept except God specified it. So, وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَارِ. All of them who are with the Prophet, they are firm against disbelievers, they are merciful amongst them. The continuation of the ayah. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنْهُمْ مَغْفِرَةً وَأَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. Allah has promised those who believed and do good from amongst them forgiveness and a great reward. So not all of them, from amongst them. He said, minhum wa'adallahu, God has promised to those who believed and done good from amongst them. It means not all of them are doing the belief or doing the good or having the belief and having goodness. There is a group though. He never said, wa'adallahu alladhina amanu wa'amilu salihati maghfiratan wa ajran azima. Nope. Minhum maghfiratan wa ajran azima. From amongst them. We mentioned earlier, ma min a'am. There has never been a general broad concept mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran except that He specified it. So it was first everyone, and then God, wait a minute, He said that there's a group though. I promise them maghfiratan wa ajran azima. Could you get to heaven without maghfirah and ajran azima? You can't. That means not everyone is subject to maghfirah and ajr. And not everyone was subject to what? The description of simahum fi wujuhim min athar as-sujud. Apparently, according to the Holy Quran, not according to me. Then, of course, if it's found in the Quran, then we accept it sam'an wa ta'an. This is one of the verses that is presented with regards to substantiating the belief that every companion of the Prophet is an adil individual. Moreover, the other verse that is used many times is in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 100. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه وأعد لهم جنات تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك الفوز العظيم. And the foremost runners, the first al-awwalun, from the migrants and the Ansar, those who came and helped the Muslims in Medina, and those who follow them afterwards, وَالَّذِينَ تَبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. God is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. And Allah has promised them heaven, وَعَدَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ, beneath which rivers flow, تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتَهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا, and they are there forever. ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. That is the great victory. Indeed, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. Indeed, Allah has made it clear. مَا مِنْ مَعَامٍ, of course, don't forget that. And so we look at that verse and we have to obviously see, are all the companions foremost, the front runners in religion? No. So this doesn't mean all the companions, but it continues, السابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم, and those who have followed them. So you hear of the tabi'is, like let's say Hassan al-Basri, and even Hassan al-Basri. And even us, we can be considered, because we followed, اتَّبَعْنَا مِلَّةَ الرَّسُولِ, we follow the way of the Prophet. So does that mean Allah has promised us heaven? No, we have to obviously believe, we have to obviously do good, we have to obviously have faith. But God made a very clear distinction. وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ, you followers, so claim to be followers of Ahlul Bayt, reject the first few individuals who were sabiqun, however, as being individuals who are upright. There are individuals from the sabiqun who you deny are individuals that deserve respect, but they are from the sabiqun, and Allah made it clear. I'll show you a sabiq, an individual like Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, a sabiqun, from the sabiqun and from the awwalun, because there were two hijras. One, the first to Habasha, Ethiopia. The second to Medina. Allah is saying, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ, the foremost front runners, them and those who followed, I have promised them heaven. God is pleased with them, they are pleased with Allah. What about Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh? Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh is a sabiq, awwalun. Before Islam, what was he? What even was he? Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh is the Prophet's cousin from his mom's side, from his auntie, cousin of the Prophet. His name's Ubaydullah, the believer of Allah, the servant slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was a Hanif, and he didn't follow any of this idolatry, and he wasn't a polytheist, he was a monotheist, he followed the way of Ibrahim. You would think this man, and he was a sabiq from the front runners, al-awwalun. He went to Habasha. They are on a lofty, higher status than anyone else because they sacrificed early when Islam was weak. So Allah really praises them. So the response coming to us is that, well, there are companions who you despise who were from the Sabiqun al-Awwalun, from the Muhajirin. So how can you, when Allah says, radiyallahu anhum? What about a man like Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, who was a cousin of the Prophet, Muwahhid, Hanif, and he believed the way of Ibrahim, he went to Habasha from the Awwalun, etc. He did irtidad, he became a murtad. He went to Ethiopia and he saw a lady he wanted to be with. She said, leave the religion of this man, be a Christian, and then I will marry you. And he was married to who would be eventually the Prophet's wife, Habiba bint Abi Sufyan, or Ramla. So he then, what happens to him? He leaves Islam to be with this lady. He became a murtad. He committed apostasy. And he left Islam, but he's from the Sabiqun, Awwalun. And he's the Prophet's cousin from his auntie. And before Islam, he could have been drinking alcohol, God knows. He could have been doing so many horrible things. He was a muwahhid on the way of Prophet Ibrahim. He became a Muslim. You would think this guy is on the highest of statuses in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nope. It doesn't matter if you're from the Sabiqun. It matters how you stay firm on the way of Allah, the wilayah of Rasulullah. Did you stay firm on that or no? Because yeah, it's not a guarantee just because you're categorized in one area. Don't end up like Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. He had everything for him. He left Islam. Is he still destined for heaven? Because apparently he is. He fits in that category, Sabiqun awwalun. And he went, and he was a muwahhid, he was a hanif, he was the Prophet's cousin. Eventually he left Islam, became a Christian, died a kafir, a murtad, apostate. His wife, Rasulullah, then married the daughter of Abu Sufyan, Habiba. He, by the way, Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh is Zainab bint Jahsh's brother, who then Rasulullah also married. So this guy is surrounded by upright individuals. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you are from a certain category. Look where I fit and fall. It matters on if you remain on it till your grave. And that is our dispute with certain individuals, where we find acts in history where treachery was committed. But you cannot be mad about that because they fit into a certain category. Well, it doesn't matter. I've seen before examples where if it was either a wife of a prophet of Islam or a prophet of God, Allah provides an example to the disbelievers regarding her. Or if it's a sabiq from the awwalun, Allah provides that example. Or we see that example in Islamic history. So this verse is contingent on whether you maintain your faith. This is with regards to the Holy Quran and some of the verses that are substantiated. It doesn't make clear that every single companion is an adil, and whatever they narrate, they will never deliberately make a sin, so they will not lie except what they narrated, given the hadith is clear. That's not found in the Holy Quran. Moreover, the term sahabi, what exactly does it mean? Because the term suhbah, sahaba, sahabi, sahib, as understood by the concept of Adalat Al-Sahaba, as we mentioned, is not found in the Holy Quran. But you find other examples when Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is addressing the mushrikeen, the polytheists. He calls them my sahabi. He says to them, Ya sahibay as-sijni, a'arbabun mutafarriquna khayrun am Allahu al-wahid al-qahhar. O my dear companions of the jail. We are in jail together, you are my companions. But they're mushrikun. Are multiple deities and gods good for you, or the one Lord, the great Al-Qahhar? The mushrikeen, they're called Sahaba. So a Sahabi can be a mushrik. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can even describe the well of Yunus alayhi salam being a companion to him. وَلَا تَكُنْ وَاصْبُرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تَكُنْ كَصَاحِبِ الْحُوتِ إِذْ نَادَى وَهُوَ مَكْظُومٌ. And be patient to the rule of your Lord, and do not be like the companion of the well. He called towards his people while he was in a very angry state. وَلَا تَكُنْ كَصَاحِبِ الْحُوتِ. The companion of, so a well can be a sahabi, mushrikeen can be your sahaba. It doesn't matter. It's a broad statement regarding those who are accompanying you. Yes, there is an ambiguous term of a good friend, my companion that is alongside me. But ultimately, a traveler is alongside me can be considered a sahabi. This is with regards to the Holy Quran. What about in certain areas of scholarship? In Sunni scholarship, you will find, let's say, Ibn Athir, a prominent alim, describing the various methodologies as to how you determine who can become and be classified as a sahabi. Ibn Athir, in his Usudul Ghaba fi Ma'rifat al-Sahaba, lists a few ulama amongst the top of the ulama, of course, within Sunni scholarship, and their various ways as to how they determine who can be classified as a companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam, such that they can fall into this category of Adalat Al-Sahaba. He mentions Sa'id bin Musayyib. Sa'id bin Musayyib is a scholar, a very recognized and honorable scholar in Sunni scholarship. Sa'id bin Musayyib says, in order to be considered a Sahabi, you must have attended 1 or 2 battles with the Holy Prophet of Islam and spent 1 or 2 years alongside the Holy Prophet of Islam. Sa'id bin Musayyib, as mentioned in Ibn Athir's Usudul Ghaba fi Ma'rifat al-Sahaba, he believes that you cannot be considered a Sahabi unless if you didn't stay with the Prophet and defend Islam with him. 1 or 2 wars, and you have to have spent at least 1 or 2 years. Okay, where is the criteria? Where did that come from? Why 1 or 2 years? Why not 10 months? Why 1 or 2 wars? Why not just witnessing what happened but not participating necessarily? Why exactly that type of approach? There's not a response. The Quran doesn't suggest, the ahadith from the Prophet's blessed lips doesn't even suggest. But he mentions Sa'id bin Musayyib, 1 or 2 years and 1 or 2 battles. The second opinion Ibn Athir mentions as to the view of the ulama and how they determine a sahabi is regarding Ahmad bin Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Imam of the Hanabila, the Hanbali school of thought, says no, not 1 or 2 years and not 1 or 2 wars. If you saw the Prophet, accompanied him for 1 hour at least, you will be considered what? A sahabi. 1 hour is enough to determine and classify you as a companion of the Holy Prophet. Afterwards, everything you say will never be of malicious, malign intent. And if there's a solid chain leading back to you narrating this, then we will accept it. Ahmad ibn Hanbal says the 1 hour. Then you have Bukhari being mentioned amongst the list of ulama here. Bukhari says that not 1 hour, not 1 or 2 years, 1 or 2 wars, if you simply accompanied or saw the Prophet. Accompanied or saw the Prophet. So you don't necessarily need to see him, but just accompany the Holy Prophet of Islam is enough to classify you as a companion. Also mentioning Al-Waqidi, who I believe has the opinion on 1 hour. If you see the Prophet for 1 hour is enough to classify you as a Sahabi. And if I am not mistaken, Ahmad bin Hanbal adds to, is enough to see just the Prophet, you will be considered a Sahabi. So Ahmad bin Hanbal, in addition to the 1 hour area here that you spent with the Prophet, he also says if you just see the Prophet of Islam, you're enough, that's enough, you're a Sahabi. Waqidi, another alim, prominent scholar, mentioned in this list, says no, 1 hour is sufficient. Anything less than that, like 30 minutes, you will not be considered a Sahabi. Ahmad bin Hanbal, he obviously has the 1 hour view, but also makes it such that if you just see him from a distance, Sahabi, done. But you have to be a Muslim, obviously. And then Bukhari really makes it easy. If you just saw him or accompanied, so you don't necessarily see him, but accompany the Prophet. How do you accompany the Prophet and not necessarily see him? Well, you know, with the traveling and the Hajj and maybe that day of Ghadir Khum where it was a lot of people. I didn't see him, it was a distance, you never really got to him, but you were accompanying him technically. Imagine like a very popular celebrity. People don't see him when they all gather, you don't know who's who, but you know you're with that group that is following him. So that is sort of the view that is being mentioned here. If you accompany or see the Prophet, you are considered a Sahabi. Okay, when you have this as your methodology, anyone who simply sees the Prophet, and then you canonize books that are used as the main sources of tradition and narrational literature, if this is your methodology, then that, from a rational perspective, does not hint some problematic element or no. Because if it's enough to see someone, then that person can just start narrating things about the Holy Prophet of Islam, and they just never heard, but they have that conviction that this is what the Prophet has said. There is no necessarily a study on that person in ilm al-rijal, a biography. Is this person reliable? Do they have moments where they've lied deliberately? La. So long as they became Sahaba by seeing the Prophet, if there's a narration that is fixed, they have narrated, we will add it to our sources. So when you read Sahih al-Bukhari or read any of these sources from scholars that espouse this view of Adalat Al-Sahaba, it's an interesting point to keep in mind. If that's the criteria, then how do I know the traditions that are being narrated are true and sincere, that this person actually heard? If the concept fits in your worldview, then by all means accept the work if you have that conviction. Otherwise, you'll have traditions narrated by people who were never there. For example, and we are coming close to the 10th of Muharram, when many decide to fast on the 10th of Muharram, they refer back to many traditions. One of them is with regards to Abu Hurairah. Abu Hurairah says the Prophet, the day he entered Medina, he saw the Jews fasting. He would say, "Ana haqqu bi Musa minkum." I have a greater right with Musa than you do, and so we will fast on this day. And he made it a sunnah. Okay, Abu Hurairah entered Islam when Rasulullah was still in Khaybar around the 7th year after Hijrah. Okay, 7th year after Hijrah, Prophet enters Medina. How is he narrating this? La, he's a Sahabi. Because he narrated it, then we have to accept it. But the man wasn't there. It doesn't matter. He would never narrate anything from malign, malicious intent because he is an adil, udul, Adalat Al-Sahaba. What about the traditions that he actually heard from the Prophet? Then those are worth considering. Then those are worth studying and looking at. But if the man wasn't there, why accept? Because he's adil. He's considered just. This is the list of a certain amount of ulama. Ibn al-Athir mentions in his work, Usul al-Ghaba fi Ma'rifat al-Sahaba. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, another piece of Sunni scholarship, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his As-Suhba was-Sahaba, or Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba, actually, Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentions, a prominent scholar of course, not to undermine Ibn Hajar's plethora of work, mentions that if a person, anyone, saw the Prophet or accompanied the Prophet from both human and jinn, will be considered a Sahabi. So the jinn are now included in this category. Why? Because there are moments in which the Prophet interacted with the world of the jinn. Now the jinn saw the Prophet, and we know the jinn are conscious and they are rational and logical like the human being. So what about them? Yeah, the jinn can be considered Sahaba. He also adds that if anyone saw the Prophet's dead body, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, see, on the day of his funeral, and a person never met the Prophet, and this is the first time they come and they see the Prophet's holy body. The Prophet may have passed away. He passed away. But because you still saw him, dead or alive, you become a Sahabi at that point. The guy never heard of the Prophet, nothing, but he saw his body right before they buried him. The burial was done. Amir al-Mu'mineen buried the Holy Prophet of Islam. People gathered and saw the Prophet. If there were those who never saw the Prophet of Islam, and this is the only time they see and accompany the Prophet while he died, yes, they are considered Sahaba. Then he mentions Ibn Hazm's comment on this. In Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentions Ibn Hazm, another prominent alim. He mentions that as-sahabatu kulluhum min ahli al-jannati qat'an. A comment from one of the scholars in Sunni scholarship, Ibn Hazm, that all the companions are from the people of paradise, period. As-sahabatu kulluhum, every single one of them are from those of Jannah. They are all going to heaven, every single 100 and over 120,000 companions. What happens if we decide to reject this concept of Adalat Al-Sahaba? What happens when we look at a companion and we say, you know what, I don't think that was a noble act that happened. I don't think that decision that this individual made was a genuine decision. When you wage war against those who the Prophet said are from me, I can't help but consider that you're waging war against the Holy Prophet of Islam. The Prophet didn't only have to say it. The Quran made it clear beforehand that قُلْ تَعَالُوا نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. I saw the anfusana aspect and I see the self. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the self of the Prophet. I saw the self of the Prophet, and I'm just taking Quran here. Go out and fight a man who wants to see his blood spilled on the ground, or fight a lady who wants to see his blood spilled on the ground. And not to mention Al-Hasanan, Abu Abdullah and Imam Al-Hussein and Imam Al-Hassan were with Amir al-Mu'mineen. So not just the nafs of the Prophet, but the grandsons of the Prophet as well, were target number one in getting rid of and eliminating. I can't help but think that that was not the most noble of acts and is too much to be considered just a simple mistake. If you can make that big of a decision, then it says a lot about your character. What happens when I reject a companion's genuine intention and maybe to some small extent belittle the integrity of that character? Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, prominent alim in Sunni scholarship, mentions in his Al-Sarim al-Maslul ala Shatim al-Rasul, he mentions a hadith that is very interesting. Its masdar, an origin, I couldn't find, but he mentions it. He says that قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم, Prophet of Islam mentioned, there will come and emerge a group of people in the future, not too far, but in the future, close in the future. They are known as the Rawafid, the rejectors. Whoever kills one of them, من قتل رافضيا فله الجنة, as blunt as possible in الصارم المسلول في شاتم الرسول or على شاتم الرسول, Ibn Taymiyyah's work here. There will be a group of people who will emerge in the future. He even adds a comment here, who reject the legitimacy of the first two khulafa, and he specifies the first two. Why not the three? Why not the four? Why not the khulafa al-Rashidun as everyone knows them to be? Why the specifically first two? These Rawafid reject the first two and they bring down of their character. Whoever kills one of them, and this is supposedly Rasulullah speaking here, whoever kills one of them is promised paradise. Okay, I as a follower and lover of Ahlul Bayt, I identify myself as one who sees Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib more worthy of assuming leadership after the Holy Prophet of Islam. Technically, what does that make me at that point? And all of us, the very few that are here, and those who are watching online, what does that make us? We preferred a man above other individuals. And not just we preferred, we said to ourselves they had no right So we brought down from their character in the sense of we did not recognize the legitimacy of the caliphate. We rejected the legitimacy. Rejected. Rafid. We are technically rawafid. Like, I as a Rafidi, and I read something like this, I say to myself, Allahu Akbar. Why the hatred? Because if it's a discussion regarding sab, insults and slandering, Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Do not slander and throw derogatory terms at the direction of those who call upon other than God. So those who are polytheists, Allah says, do not use sab against them. And mushrik, shirk, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرِكَ بِهِ. Quran states, God does not forgive the one who does shirk, associates partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the biggest sin in Islamic worldview, that sin that is committed, the one committing it, I cannot throw words and slander, derogatory terms in their direction. Okay, if I can't do that with them, clearly I can't do that with anyone else. The biggest of sins that is committed, the one committing, I cannot insult them with sab and cuss words. Literally F-bombs and B-bombs and Z-bombs and M-bombs, whatever it may be. I can't use that because it's not from the character or follower of Ahlul Bayt. The Imams never taught us, hey, use cuss words so we can relax a bit. So we can have, relaxation that our followers are cussing and use. No. But asking Allah to remove, invoking from Allah to remove the mercy from anyone who brought about hatred or who brought about a lot of oppression and injustice to the Prophet's family is something we hold dear to, because Allah taught us that there are people who are people that Allah makes mention of, وَيَلْعَنْهُمُ اللَّاعِنُونَ, that they are the ones who are being asked and invoked by Allah to remove the mercy from them. That there are people who are oppressors on this world. Back then, now, in the future, oppression is around. And evil tyrants, we ask Allah to subtract any mercy or blessing they have in their lives. This is la'an. La'an is found. Sab is not of the character. Some may bring a hadith from, let's say, Al-Kafi, because this has happened before, where someone sees, look, in Al-Kafi by Shaykh Al-Kulayni, we have a tradition that says, as far as Ahlul Bid'ah, those who are innovators, فَكَثْرُوا فِي سَبِّهِمْ, increase the amount of slandering you do to them. Why? Because they have innovated in our faith. In Al-Kafi, you find it goes back to Rasulullah, and if I'm not mistaken, another tradition with the same exact content, going back to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. As far as Ahlul Bid'ah, those who innovate, increase your sab to them. Slander, cuss at them, their direction, because they've innovated. There's a contradiction. Why? Because Quran said don't even slander a mushrik. So how can I slander an innovator? What's a bigger sin? God doesn't forgive shirk. Sin, God can, the sin of innovation, God can forgive. But then here he says, slander these people. But the Quran says, don't even slander the mushrik. So when hadith contradicts Quran, which one do I prioritize? Quran or hadith? Quran. Sab is not found in our worldview as a character that is good and of the upright morals that a follower of Ahlul Bayt should do. Honestly, ask yourself, do you think Imam al-Mahdi is just waiting for one person to drop an F-bomb or a negative slur or something that is genuinely seen as a bad word towards the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, and he just relaxes and says, yes, alhamdulillah, someone used a bad word towards one of our enemies? Did la'an? Yes. They understood why they were evil, they understood why they oppressed al-Muhammad, and they asked, Ya Allah, remove the blessings and mercy you have on them. That comes with understanding, of course. But just sab is not of the qualities and characters of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, brothers and sisters. However, when I, in accordance to this particular phrase and decree issued by Ibn Taymiyyah, this fatwa, that whoever rejects the first two khulafa is considered a Rafidi. And فَمَنْ قَتَلَ رَافِضِيًّا فَلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ, whoever kills a Rafidi is deserving of heaven. Okay, so when I fight the fourth Khalifa on the battle of Siffin, I am considered a mujtahid because I used my ijtihad and rationale and I concluded the man was wrong. However, when I question the legitimacy and reject the legitimacy of the first two khulafa, I'm deserving of death. But when I fight the fourth one, I become a mujtahid ayatullah al-uzma for some odd reason. That is part of the reason why, brothers and sisters, this concept of Adalat Al-Sahaba is problematic in the Shia worldview. Let's move forth with what does the concept of adil even mean? Adala. Who can deduce what it means to be just? How can we say this person is just? What does it take to be just? Sheikh Hassan bin Farhan al-Maliki mentions in his As-Suhba was-Sahaba. He mentions Sheikh Hassan bin Farhan al-Maliki, Sunni alim in Saudi Arabia today, currently in prison for his remarks on some areas that we're discussing, one of them being Adalat Al-Sahaba, the man thinking and using his head. He lists 11 different opinions from 11 different scholars regarding a definition for adil. To be adil, you must never commit big sins only. Small ones you can't commit. That's one opinion. To be adil, you must not commit big and small sins. And he even mentions Ibn Hajib's opinion in his book As-Suhba was-Sahaba li Shaykh Hassan bin Farhan al-Maliki, that Ibn Hajib mentions that they, in order to be considered udul, an adil person, cannot perform major sins, because we have kaba'ir and sagha'ir, big sins, small sins, and even certain mubahat. So certain neutral things that are not mustahab or makruh or haram or wajib. So certain acts like playing games. It's not mustahab, it's not anything. There are even acts of mubahat that you shouldn't even do to be considered a sahabi. So tell me, every single companion of the Prophet did this? Every single companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam was like this in that type of behavior that didn't even perform mubahat, specific mubahat? So he lists these things. And then ultimately you find Al-Dhahabi in his Kaba'ir making the final statement here. فَمَنْ طَعِنَ فِيهِمْ أَوْ سَبَّهُمْ فَقَدْ خَرَجَ مِنَ الدِّينِ وَمَرَقَ مِنْ مِلَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And whoever questions their integrity or slanders them, they are no longer Muslims, they have left Islam, and they are not considered from the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is ultimately the main reason why, brothers and sisters, we do not accept such a concept. Let's come and view the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada while we discuss the companions of Rasulullah, because they were companions of Rasulullah who joined Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Ashura. Amongst them, Anas ibn al-Harith al-Kahili. Another one of them was Abdul Rahman bin Abd Rabbah al-Ansari. And then you find Muslim ibn Awsaja and Habib ibn Mudahir. These two upright companions of Rasulullah, these four upright companions of Rasulullah, but particularly these two, Muslim ibn Awsaja and Habib ibn Mudahir, were of the companions who you notice gave everything they could to Sayyid al-Shuhada on that day. For they had met the Holy Prophet of Islam, and they had heard the reports and the ahadith, Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn. And they heard Rasulullah cry over Abu Abdullah. And so when Abu Abdullah left Medina to go to Karbala, he was accompanied by these companions that were with him. Brothers and sisters, there was even a companion of the Holy Prophet who fought Sayyid al-Shuhada, Shabath bin Rib'i. Shabath ibn Rib'i was a companion of the Prophet who had left Islam after the Prophet died. He joined the famous prophetess Sajah. This lady, he joined her after she failed in her mission. He then came back and became a Muslim. When Uthman ibn Affan was being attacked and besieged, he joined the attack to get rid of Uthman. Then he joined Imam Ali when he fought against Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. Then he became a Khariji and left Imam Ali and fought against both Imam Ali and Muawiyah. Then when the Khawarij left, he went back and joined Banu Umayyah. Then he joined Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And when Sayyid al-Shuhada made his way, this Shabath bin Rib'i, could you imagine a Sahabi, Shabath bin Rib'i, call that Adil Udul? Is that sincerely someone who you would consider Adil? He joins Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. When Imam al-Hussein makes it to Karbala, he then fights Abu Abdullah. Allahu Akbar. One companion fighting, and the other companion fighting the other side. When Abu Abdullah is martyred and slaughtered on the day of Ashura, brothers and sisters, this Shabath bin Rib'i, He then hides. Why? Because Mukhtar came into the scene. And so he joins Mukhtar to avenge Imam al-Hussein. This guy is someone who should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. From here to there to here, there to there. When he saw that Mukhtar was after him because he ultimately contributed to fighting Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, he then went and joined Mus'ab ibn Zubair in Basra, and that's where he died. This a companion, someone like him, Adil. Yeah, but he left Islam, but then he came back to Islam, then he joined this, then he joined that, then he joined. What do you make of that type of character? However, let's forget a character like that and look at the characters who gave everything they could so valiantly. Muslim, Habib, and you find how honorable it was for them to join the grandson of Rasulullah. Muslim ibn Awsaja and Habib ibn Mudahir, both narrators of Rasulullah, memorizers of the Quran, warriors valiantly on the field, lovers of Ahlul Bayt, and ultimately martyrs in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between Abu Abdullah's hands. Muslim ibn Awsaja, he goes and he fights valiantly on that day. And he kills several of these men, but he's an old man. And so they realize he cannot be fought one-on-one. Muslim ibn Awsaja is a disciple of Amir al-Mu'mineen, of course. Therefore, Muslim begins to fight, they surround him. Muslim ibn Awsaja is then put to the ground. As he is dying, Muslim ibn Awsaja, this companion of Rasulullah, we say to him, Hani'an lak, congratulations, may God bless you, glad tidings, with the Prophet, then with Imam Ali, then with Abu Abdullah. On his final moment, he is approached by two, Imam al-Hussein and Habib ibn Mudahir, and these three were the best of friends. Imam Hussein alayhi salam looks at Muslim ibn Awsaja, and he's with Habib ibn Mudahir, and Habib begins to say, "Oh my beloved friend, had I known that I would live longer than this moment, and had I known that you would have died now and that I would live beyond the couple minutes that I have with you," because Habib would immediately die right after Muslim ibn Awsaja. He would be next. Had I been there a bit longer for you, I would have asked you to write your will to me. And the following line is truly heartbreaking. He says, "I will tell you my will." He says to him, Muslim ibn Awsaja, pointing at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, أوصيك بهذا أوصيك بهذا الغريب غريب الغاضرية. He says, I ask you to take care of this stranger. He points at Imam al-Hussein. Watch out for him, the stranger of Karbala. This is my last and final will. Habib ibn Mudahir then looks at Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and he promises Muslim ibn Awsaja what he had left in his will. And so that means Habib goes and fights. Habib ibn Mudahir starts fighting the enemy. He kills tens of them, but they surround Habib ibn Mudahir. As they get closer to Habib, before he falls to the ground, he calls out with his loudest voice, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Peace be upon you, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Peace be upon you, O son of Rasulullah. Habib, honorable, saw the Prophet, saw Imam Ali, and died seeing the blessed face of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and he falls to the ground. But brothers and sisters, Habib falls, Muslim falls, Abu Abdullah didn't fall. He was laying and his head was taken to the spears, and their heads were paraded in Kufa. A young boy by the name of Qasim, the son of Habib ibn Mudahir, looks around for the heads that have been paraded, and he sees his father's head, Habib ibn Mudahir, and he cries over his beloved father. But we ask this young Qasim ibn Habib, you cried for your father Habib ibn Mudahir. What about the daughters of Abu Abdullah? How did they cry seeing the head of their father on the spear? Not just their father, the head of their uncle Abu al-Fadl. Not just Abu al-Fadl, the head of Ali al-Asghar. Even the infant had his head raised to the sky on the spear. السلام على أنصار الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. فرج عنا يا Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you on behalf of the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada to grant us the shafa'a of Abi Abdillah. Oh Allah, we ask you on behalf of Sayyid al-Shuhada to grant us the ziyarah of Abi Abdillah. Oh Allah, we ask you on the one who was ill in Karbala, Imam Zainul Abidin, to heal all those who are sick, remove this affliction, remove this disease. Oh Allah, we ask you to ease the pain from the lovers of Ahlul Bayt and to grant us all of our hajat in the dunya and in the akhirah. We ask you with a suratul mubarakat al-Fatiha, but before it, as-salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allah.